The courtroom didn't just go silent. Its snapped tension struck like a thunderbolt bolt. The moment prosecutors pressed play a time-stamped hotel surveillance clip from 2016. And in that blurry footage, the figure in the frame seemed strikingly familiar. It was Diddy, calm, poised until he wasn't.
Now, as far as jury selection goes, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that both sides expect to have all of this done in the matter of 3 days. Now, given just how high profile this trial is, I was kind of stunned that they seem very confident that they will be able to seat a jury in that amount of time.
The decision guarantees Combs will face trial beginning just 4 days from now that will test whether one of music's most prolific figures used his power, wealth, and fame to exploit both women and men for decades.
Elaborate, sometimes days-long parties by coercing victims through drugs, threats, and manipulation. They claim to have video evidence, and some of the accusations echo details from over 70 civil lawsuits filed against Combs over the last 30 years.
Major developments tonight involving the case against Sean Diddy Combs, what he decided in court today, and what this now means, the move coming just 4 days before his trial is set to begin. Here's Aaron Katursky.
The video revealed a scene that sharply contradicted what he'd sworn under oath mere days before. Not only did the room gasp, one juror reportedly dropped their pen, another shook their head in disbelief. This wasn't just a discrepancy, it was a dramatic level twist that tore the whole trial wide open. You could sense it in the room. The jury didn't just doubt Diddy, they felt betrayed.
I literally took one sip of my beverage and the whole side of my face felt like I had a stroke.
Isn't that, to my mind, that's one of the bigger hurdles in selecting a jury this coming week, is that there is, at least anecdotally, and, when I talk to people, they have that opinion, strongly held opinion, that there's celebrity tapes, that they've kind of conflated Epstein, and you mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell and all of these things into Diddy. There's this idea that somehow this is Epstein redux or something.
Court insiders noted you could see the color fade from his lawyer's face as the clip played on the tape didn't need a narrator. The body language alone shouted, "This isn't what you testified." And just like that, Diddy's carefully built defense began to crumble frame by frame. It wasn't just a trust issue. It was a courtroom explosion. This wasn't some small inconsistency. This was the kind of caught-in-the-act moment attorneys pray for and defendants dread. Because once the jury sees proof that you lied, once everything else you say becomes tainted.
The last hearing before Sean Combs' trial starts, when he walked into federal court today, he appeared to be looking for his family. They've pretty much been at all of the hearings that I've been to, but there was no presence of his sons or his mother or his sister who had previously been at those hearings.
Do you still think that, because there is this public perception, that there are celebrity tapes involved in this case?
No.
Do you still think that there are minors involved in this case?
I'm certain no.
Okay.
And again, when you say this case, we're talking the criminal case.
The criminal case.
In the
correct.
criminal,
I know that.
In the criminal case,
right.
No.
And that's when the real harm begins. The jury didn't just lose faith. They looked like they lost tolerance, and it was only day 3. The fallout from that clip wasn't even the largest shock of the week the moment the prosecution unveiled the 2016 surveillance footage. The entire room changed. It wasn't just evidence, it was a gut punch.
Disgraced hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs back in court today, the rapper appearing in a beige smock and pants for his pretrial hearing. Federal prosecutors are saying that they were on track to disclose all of the available evidence to the defense by the end of the year. Well, Diddy has been held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn following his arrest in September in a federal sex trafficking case. Last week, Combs abandoned what was his 4th attempt to get released on bail. Joining me for more on this is ABC News correspondent Aaron Katursky. So, Aaron, I know you just essentially left that courtroom. So what do we know about today's hearing?
Well, the prosecutors said they would disclose every piece of evidence that's in their possession by the end of the year. So by December 31st, the defense should have everything. And then the case is going to move toward trial in the spring of next year. Before that, the defense says it wants some clarity from the prosecutors about the scope of Combs's alleged criminal conduct, because right now, defense attorney Mark Agnifilo said the racketeering allegations that Combs faces, the defense believes are
The clip pulled from hotel security records showed Diddy and Cassie in a faintly lit hallway. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual, but then everything shifted. The footage allegedly captured a moment that was far too physical, far too forceful, and far too specific to be overlooked. What made it explosive wasn't just what it revealed, but what Diddy had claimed didn't happen.
Hunting this guy for major felonies, and Fiddy seems to be sitting on the sidelines cheering. Now, that could be for one or two reasons. One is he knows things or suspects things about Mr. Combs. The other one is that he's just got a real perverse sense of competition.
One thing I know for sure is that when it comes to our culture, sometimes we cannibalize our own more than anybody else. And, we've seen the former president of the United States inspire the country to turn into Spider-Man and climb up the Capitol to overthrow the government in the middle of an election. But yet we haven't seen his mugshot or seen his kids handcuffed. I've known Justin for probably 15 years. Quincy, one of his sons, and his other sons. Those are really good kids. So to see them in handcuffs, to see them put on display as criminals, or to be put into the conversation that they somehow are ushering underage kids into the compound for their dad to have their way with them. Those aren't the...
Because under oath, Diddy had already declared confidently that nothing of the sort had ever taken place that moment supposedly invented, blown out of proportion, pure fabrication. But this clip, it told a very different tale. The movements, the timing, the location, it all matched too perfectly. It didn't just weaken his testimony.
Back up a little bit, please. How can you support your father? How do you support him moving forward?
Bill and Sade, accepting a plea agreement would mean that Sean Combs would have to admit to trafficking and force. And today he made it very clear that was not going to happen. Diddy maintained all along these encounters involved consenting adults and plans to take his chances that a jury agrees.
Well, it's not up to me. It's up to Mr. Combs, and I don't see it happening.
Why?
Because he believes he's innocent. He believes he's innocent. And what's more, he believes that he needs to stand up, not just for himself, for his family, and for everybody who's been targeted by the federal government.
It set the entire thing ablaze. Courtroom sources described jurors glancing at one another, their faces unreadable but clearly disturbed. One juror reportedly leaned forward, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the screen like they were watching a drama unfold in real time.
Because this time around, Diddy was brought in first. He was brought in about a couple minutes after 2 p.m. today. And we were all kind of waiting to see. We had heard mumblings that his mom might be in courtroom, that we were waiting for the children, but then nothing happened. But then, in another twist and turn, the children do walk in. But this time it was a lot smaller bunch than it was the last time. So last time you're having all of Diddy's children, except with the exception of Love, who is just a 2-year-old child, so she wasn't at court, but you had all of Diddy's children there except Love. But this time around, you just had Justin Combs and Christian Combs, meaning that there was no Quincy there today. Delilah and Jesse weren't there. Chance wasn't there. And the caretakers of his younger children who aren't of age just yet, they were not present inside the courtroom as well today.
It revealed something raw, a public belief that this wasn't just a courtroom. It was a stage where wealth might still call the shots. That juror wasn't alone. Another was dismissed after admitting to daily marijuana use, a detail that sparked concern among both legal teams. Could someone navigating a trial of this scale, already emotionally heavy and media saturated, be trusted to maintain the focus and clarity needed to deliver a fair verdict? The court didn't think so, and it kept going. One prospective juror admitted to being a lifelong fan of Diddy's music and said they weren't sure they could separate the man from the legend. Another revealed they had a cousin who once interned at Bad Boy Records and had nothing positive to say about the company. It was chaos. Both prosecution and defense teams spent days sifting through backgrounds, analyzing body language, and questioning strangers on their deepest biases. The stakes were immense. This wasn't just about justice, it was about whether a jury could even exist that hadn't already formed an opinion on a man whose face has dominated headlines for months. The courtroom wasn't. just selecting jurors. It was trying to create a bubble in a world filled with noise. And even that effort seemed to be faltering. Reporters outside noted that some dismissed jurors were already selling their stories to media outlets. Some were even boasting online about nearly making it onto the Diddy trial. It was mayhem carefully disguised in formality. But here's the kicker. The ones who did make it into that jury box. They're now the final barrier between Diddy and a legacy-shattering verdict. And based on early courtroom reactions, their tolerance for celebrity games is running dangerously low in a move that left the entire courtroom stunned. Diddy's legal team flipped the narrative hard after days of mounting pressure and damning clips. They didn't just defend him, they tried to reframe him according to the defense. Diddy wasn't the aggressor. He was the one who endured the turmoil behind closed doors, and at the center of this twist, Cassie Ventura, with absolute conviction, the defense, painted a picture of Diddy as a man caught in a toxic relationship where he was allegedly manipulated, intimidated, and yes, emotionally and physically drained by Cassie. The implication that everything the public thinks they know is reversed, that the narratives playing out in headlines and group chats are one-sided, that Diddy was scared, trapped, and reacting to trauma, not causing it. It was bold, it was shocking, and depending on who you ask, it was desperate. Courtroom insiders say the jury's reaction to this shift was complex. Some jurors leaned back, arms crossed, clearly doubtful. Others kept their expressions blank, but their body language told the story. Tense, guarded, unsure. After all the video evidence had already suggested a different story. So this reversal didn't just raise eyebrows, it tested patience to support their claims. The defense referenced past texts and alleged disputes, moments that were never public, never recorded on tape. They claimed Cassie had a pattern of manipulation, and framed Diddy as someone who stayed silent out of embarrassment, fear, or loyalty, and they didn't stop there. They hinted the idea that more surprising disclosures were coming possibly from other past relationships. But here's the issue: the timing. This pivot came after prosecutors had already trapped Diddy with footage that broke his credibility wide open. So to some in the gallery, it felt less like a plan and more like damage control, a last-ditch effort to humanize a man who'd just been shown in what the media is calling the hallway clip, heard around the world, and it ignited a storm outside the courtroom too. Social media was alight. Some users questioned whether this was a legitimate defense or just a way to confuse the jury and shift public sympathy. Others, especially longtime fans, saw it as Diddy's first real moment of vulnerability. But the vast majority, they called it out for what it looked like: a high-risk pivot with little room for error. Because once a jury sees a lie and then gets hit with a "but actually, I'm the victim" storyline, you're not just asking them to rethink. You're asking them to erase what they just saw. And in this case, that ask might be far too big. The defense wasn't finished because just when it looked like things were spiraling, the prosecution hit an unexpected obstacle that could shift the momentum entirely. Just as the prosecution seemed to be charging ahead with viral video evidence and a visibly shaken jury, they hit a wall, a big one. One of their most anticipated witnesses, referred to in court documents as Victim 3, suddenly went quiet. No return calls, no confirmed court appearance, just vanished. And for a case this high stakes, that kind of absence isn't just inconvenient. It's destabilizing. Victim 3 was supposed to be a cornerstone, someone who had, according to sources close to the case, firsthand experience with Diddy during a specific time frame that aligned with several of the accusations. Her testimony wasn't just emotional weight. It was timeline confirmation per statements. Attorneys believed would have backed up the allegations with chilling detail, giving jurors another thread of consistency across multiple incidents. Now that thread is frayed court. Insiders said the moment prosecutors realized she was off the grid, everything changed. Backup plans kicked in. Depositions were rushed. Other witnesses were pushed forward in the schedule, but the impact was clear, losing a key voice, especially when the jury was told to expect, makes the case feel weaker. It gives the defense room to breathe, to attack, to sow doubt. And that's exactly what they did within hours of her absence becoming public. Diddy's team started framing it as proof that the prosecution's narrative was unraveling. They floated theories quietly but strategically that maybe she didn't want to testify because the story wasn't as solid as claimed, that maybe this whole thing was overblown. They didn't have to prove it. They just had to suggest it, and unfortunately it worked. Media headlines shifted overnight. What had been a freight train of bad press for Diddy suddenly turned into a question, where is victim 3? News anchors speculated, commentators debated whether she was scared, silenced, or simply uninterested in revisiting old wounds, Reddit threads, and TikTok videos piled on with amateur sleuths digging for her identity and motives. The prosecution, for its part, tried to stay composed. They reminded the court that witness trauma is real, that not everyone is ready to relive deeply personal experiences in front of cameras and strangers. But the damage was already done. The absence didn't just remove her from the stand, it left a gap in the prosecution's momentum, and while one missing witness doesn't destroy a case in a trial, this public, this sensational. It creates space for doubt to creep in space that the defense is now filling with carefully crafted counter-narratives and media spin that's turning day by day. But just when it seemed the prosecution was backpedaling, the outside world stepped in and turned up the heat on the entire courtroom. Because this trial, it's not just legal anymore, it's viral, and that's where things really start to boil.